Welcome back to 10,000 Miles. Today's guest is Dr. Elise Victor. She's been someone I've been really looking forward to having on the show because she sits at the center of something a lot of leaders are trying to figure out right now. How do you lead with emotional intelligence and humanity in a world where artificial intelligence is moving faster than we can keep up? Dr. Elise just doesn't talk about AI, she talks about people. How leaders can use technology without losing their values, how to create cultures of trust while everything around us is just shifting. And she's got a real gift for breaking it down in a way that makes you stop, think, and want to do better. So if you're leading a team or running a business, or you're just trying to stay grounded, this episode's going to hit home. So let's dive in. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We are back with another episode of 10,000 Miles. And today I have the pleasure of introducing our audience to Dr. Elise Victor. Elise, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Vic. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for fitting us into your schedule. I know we worked pretty diligently and had to move a few things around, but here we are, and I'm super appreciative to have you on today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this show.
Good to hear. And I found out we're neighbors. We live 45 minutes apart from one another, so it's a home team effort here today, which is great. Super excited.
Absolutely.
Elise, why don't you take a few minutes and with your own words, introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Great. So my name is Elise Victor. I have spent 25 years in industry roles spanning from finance to healthcare. And through that experience, I have really come to develop an appreciation for leadership, a lot of the skills that drive effective leadership. And most recently, I was a professor at the University of North Texas, and my specific discipline is information science. So really that's the study of looking at data and how people use data in different settings. So whether that's in healthcare, in leadership, disaster management, there's a variety of ways that information is managed. So we look at that on the individual level as well as the organizational level. So through my experience with a variety of leadership roles and coupled with the education, I found a passion for understanding how technology adoption impacts people both on a personal level and then organizationally. And so what I have really focused my research on in the past 5 years as I've been teaching is the impact of AI as we have evolved. And that's kind of what brought Vic and I together is that.
So, yeah, and there are two topics that really brought us together, and I'm not sure I disclosed the first one. I'm a giant fan and study of great leadership. Read a lot of books, wrote a book called The Lucky 13, 13 Core Competencies of Leadership. So your background was naturally attractive to me because I'm a big fan of people's perspectives on leadership. And then as your talk about, how AI is impacting the emotional and psychological spaces that we live in is super important to me because on the other side of my business, I focus on bringing AI solutions into call centers and into businesses and want to do so responsibly. So this kind of information was super interesting to me. And I have lots of colleagues and viewers of this show in my space that I know are going to be interested in it. If you don't mind, let's go back a little bit. So, when did you, through your professional career, when did you latch on to sort of the importance of solid leadership as something vital or more than just a poster?
I will say as my career evolved, when I pivoted from consulting over to healthcare, I began, it's obviously a very, very different environment. I was working with providers, clinicians, and working for a large insurance company. And we decided to adopt a technology solution that would impact everyone, organizationally, all stakeholders. And I was leading that. And it was an AI solution back in 2013 when the Affordable Care Act was passed. And
Okay.
I would say that's sort of what started this path that I'm on now is the experience of bringing that huge and I guess impactful technology into the organization that impacted pretty much every area of it, and
Yeah.
working with all of the leaders. Well, actually, I'd say all of the employees, from leadership to call center, like you said, call center employees,
Yeah.
and really understanding not just the technology part of it, but what are the downstream human impacts of bringing this in and going beyond just the company, but what about the patients, the
Yeah.
insured, the physicians that are using this, and how does that impact everybody? I think that opened my eyes to really how important leadership is
Hmm.
when you're making huge changes in an organization. And that extends obviously beyond technology, but right now I think a lot of people are, it's the hot topic, AI. There's a
Yeah.
lot of changes happening, and so that's where I'm really focusing the kind of my effort.
Where did you go to school?
I did my undergraduate degree in business at Cal State Northridge, and then
Okay.
I went to UConn, and I have a master's in accounting. And then I
Okay.
went to Cal State Long Beach, and I have a master's in healthcare administration. And then my PhD is from the University of North Texas, where I was teaching. Yeah,
Fantastic.
that's
My daughter just graduated from UNT in May. Yeah,
okay.
she started.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She started out, my youngest. She started out at OU. Wasn't her place. Great school. My oldest graduated from there. Um, I think she really just got super homesick. So she called me one day with a plan and said, "Hey, I have this plan, and I hope you're sitting down." And so I'm like, "Okay." She goes, "Don't want to go to OU anymore. Did all the research. I want to go to UNT. I could do a lot of this stuff online. I could live at home. I could probably even work full time. And I want to be busy. I want to get it done. And here's my plan to make sure my credits transfer and I graduate on time." And she did.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable. And she crushed it, but, had a great experience up there. A couple of my colleagues have graduated from UNT. Um, and interestingly enough, I had a guy on the podcast the other day who's got a real musical family, and he's an amazing musician. And he noted UNT as like one of these great music schools. And I said, "Isn't it ironic that my daughter, who has no interest in music, graduated from UNT, and it's renowned for its music program?" So, but that's my UNT connection. So, during your school time, was there any sort of beacon of light or something that said, "Hey, I may be interested in these topics on a go forward basis," or has your life been a progression of experiences that led you in different directions?
I would say probably the latter. Uh,
Okay.
you know, s- I think even looking before school and just, my childhood and growing up, I think there were elements of what has really brought me to where I am today, infused throughout. I don't think there was a pivotal moment during my
Okay.
education. I spent a lot of time while I was in school, or excuse me, I took a break actually. Let me back up.
Okay.
You might want to edit that part.
No, it's okay. We like it live.
Okay.
I might even
So
keep the phone ringing.
um, so it's interesting. When I was younger in high school, I actually decided to do a program that was a partnership at our high school with our local community college. So we had the opportunity, and I know there's quite a few programs now, but this was back in the 90s. So it was a little more, out there and different. And
Yeah.
I was able to take college classes during high school, to fulfill my, 2 years of college requirements. So I was 16 and I said, I'm going to finish my associate's degree by the time I graduate high school. That was my goal. I'm going to do both of these at the same time. And so I did that. I was able to, juggle, make all of that work. And from that point, I took a couple of years off until I went and
Okay.
completed my bachelor's degree. So I had from 18 to 21. And I really spent a lot of that time reading leadership books, self-development books, Tony
Amazing.
Robbins. I went and walked on fire. I did
Love
all of
it.
these things. And I also did a few entrepreneurial things. There was some like network marketing. I kind of just learned, with whatever was coming my way, how to make money to do things. At one point, this was after college, but I started selling things on eBay and ended up, making about $500,000 with just products I was figuring out how to do. So I've kind of always been, inspired by different things outside of the realm of traditional education. And so during those 3 years, I went and I worked for some companies. I moved to LA. I just had a whole lot of different experiences, and then I realized, okay, I need to go back to school. This is what I really wanted to do. So that's where I transferred those 2 years to Cal State Northridge, and then went into the business program. So I would say there were a lot of patterns throughout my life of different things where I gravitated towards just entrepreneurship, leadership, understanding people, how things work, and was able to put that together, with the education and then a number of roles that I had. I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I ran a team. I worked for another consulting company that was national, where I had people all over the US. So I had to figure out how you manage remote teams. This was pre-COVID. What works, what doesn't work, how to be an effective leader, and have always been a lifelong learner. I'm always reading something, trying to figure something out. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there are no coincidences. And the more I talk to you, the more I realize why this was put together by the universe, by God, whatever people out there believe. Um, I have a question for you. And it's only because I followed a similar path. Like, what is it at 19, let's call it 18 to 21, you said, that got you interested in the Tony Robbins stuff? Because my Robbins journey goes back decades. And there was something about it when it wasn't very mainstream. As a matter of fact, I listened to it on cassettes. Okay. I never did a firewalk, but I have a friend who coached for Tony for
Yeah.
10 plus years. And he and I got introduced to Robbins at the same time. What brought you there at such a young age? That's not the age that people typically get attracted to that stuff, because as my friend who's a business coach and went through the Robbins program, worked for Tony for 10 years, we always talk about trying to influence our own kids. Or maybe you're in a car and you put a Robbins tape in or something very positive and sort of, aligning of the brain. It's like they want nothing to do with that stuff. So, what is it for you that brought you to that made you say, hey, this sounds interesting?
I can't remember the exact way that I was introduced to Tony Robbins, but I think the
Mm-hmm.
mindset of being a person that would adopt that even at a young age was set in place years before. I
Okay.
think, I was 18 and I may have come across Unlimited Power or at the bookstore, maybe read a couple pages and thought, oh, this is interesting, and then I started to listen to, the audio, and became obsessed with it and loved it. But
Yeah.
I would say that mindset really came from when I was probably before I was even 10.
Wow.
I grew up in a home that was there was a lot of problems. I had to figure things out myself. And I think
Okay.
I took on that responsibility and realized at an early age that if I was ever going to get from A to B, I would have to figure out how to do it. So by
Interesting.
the time I was 11, I pretty much did everything on my own.
Wow.
Decisions, things. My mom wasn't born in this country. So, a lot of things were different and new for her. My parents were divorced. She was busy working. And, I just had to sort of take that on. Even at, probably 12, 13, I was helping her, translate or understand when she was going to go buy a car. So I really
Understood.
had to be that adult.
Yeah.
And I think so something in me clicked, when I was in high school is if I want to, be successful, if I want to have these things in life that I don't have now, I have to do something. And education was always ingrained in my mind. I think from my grandparents, they were
Mm-hmm.
both very well educated. My paternal grandparents, and they always emphasized that. And so I think somehow hearing that message, and they both passed by the time I was 10, but hearing it it was like I still hear it, right?
Yeah.
I even give people that advice of, your education. No one can ever take that from you. You have that, it doesn't have to be formal. You don't have to have a degree, but just learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's what motivated me to understand that. And that's why I think I adopted reading those books. I knew that if I could do that and then incorporate those things, I could change my life. And I think with Tony, the part that I was probably missing was the action, right? He focuses a lot on, you've got to do
Massive
it.
action plan.
And yeah, take
Yeah.
massive action. And so I think that's what putting those things together helped me really kind of catapult to what I did and create the life that I have, which, wouldn't uh, statistically be what it is today. Generally, I would say.
Yeah. Vision without action are dreams. Right. And
Yeah.
the difference between vision and getting to dreams is action. Like you have to take action. And I think, it's funny you mention that. That was what I got out of the cassette tapes, and then ultimately onto CDs and other things, but massive action plan. And I went through I think mine was 30 days. It was a 30-day. I can't remember if it was 30 or 90, but I did it twice.
Okay.
And I had a very interesting experience. And if you don't mind, I'll share with you.
Yeah.
I did it the first time and Elise, I was on fire. Okay. I had my books. I had my plan. I was checking stuff off and I was always a list guy. Like I was always a guy, oh, what do I have to do tomorrow? I had the night, during the day prior, I'd make sure it was in my list of things to do. When I went to bed at night, I put those things in order. This was before, everything was Outlook on my phone or I had a task manager or anything. I always had books. As a matter of fact, if you look around my office, it looks pretty neat in the little frame here, but I got books everywhere. Okay. Most of them are old notebooks that I just refuse to throw away of all the things I've written from years and years and years and years. Can never find anything in them because they're not and I've switched over to this guy, right? Which is the remarkable
Uh-huh.
electronic notebook. And I have 50 notebooks inside this notebook. But I would organize. And the point I'm trying to make is I went through this plan. I was newly married too. And I loved it. I said, holy cow, this is unbelievable. And I didn't have the understanding or maybe the communication skills or maybe the patience or all three that I have now in trying to sort of introduce people to topics and things. I was young. I was excited. And I said to my wife, I'm going to do this together and you should do it too. We should do this together. You should do it too. And I explained to it. And one of the things I love most about my wife, also sometimes frustrating, but I've come to really love it, is my wife knows who she is. Okay. She knows who she is. She's a great person. She loves nostalgia. She loves talking about her childhood. She's very in the now, but has all these great fond memories. And it wasn't easy for her. Not like it was all, rainbows and butterflies, but has these great memories and really strong roots to sort of where she came from. And she resisted me on doing that. Oh, nah, that guy, with the big smile and no, that's not for me. And maybe I pushed too hard. And finally I lived in Westfield, New Jersey. It was a nice, quaint little town. I'm walking down the street and it was like a beam of light came and hit me right in the head. And I realized she's not hearing that we can be better together. She's hearing that I don't think she's good enough. Like there's room for an improvement that I'm trying to make in her life. And so rather than explain it to her at the time in a way that I sort of newly understood it, I elected to back off and let her find it through me or through the things that are, because I think, if I benefit from it, we all benefit from it, right? I'm going to bring this to the house, to the family and all of those things. But that was interesting. But I did find a lot of kindred spirit out there with the Robin stuff. I wasn't quite as young as 19 or 20. I might have been in my late 20s, maybe 27, 28. And the good news is I had a Robbins buddy. Like we discovered this thing together. And oddly enough, one of my Robbins buddies turned out to be, for a brief time, Dee Snider from the band Twisted Sister. We're not gonna take it. You know that song?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my friend Tony played in one of his bands, and then he got to talking about Robbins, and he goes, "Oh, my buddy Vic's into Robbins, and oh, I love talking about people about this stuff." And we got on the phone one day, and I think we talked for like 3 hours, because we were going through the program together, and we had stayed in touch for a little while over it. But I'm always intrigued by how people found it. And I didn't know prior to this call that you went down the Robbins path. And I'm always interested because I think more people would benefit, maybe not if exactly from Robbins, but from the study in, massive action, but also balancing in emotional intelligence. There are so many topics that I think are underserved in early education. And I'll call it high school. I mean, clearly there's stuff that can come before, but financial literacy, real financial literacy, not writing a checkbook out and balancing your checkbook. That's table stakes, but real financial literacy, real understanding of how to manage your life, a business, emotional intelligence, the game changer and the difference maker in people's lives and careers. And then obviously a true understanding of empathy, and not for a term, but in practice with action, understanding, and really being able to listen to understand and not listen to respond. There's a lot of things that all come together. I'm still a work in progress, Elise. I'm still learning, but these are the things that I wish my 20-year-old self would have been introduced. So I I can envision your path, by the way, as you laid it out. And I go, yep, I get it. Because for whatever reason, being this necessity you had at 11 to be the translator, the communicator, the assister through things, your early infusion of the importance of education, your work ethic, and the thing that turned on that said, oh, I'm going to graduate high school with an associate's degree. I know a few people who have done that, not many, but I know a few. It was available here in the town where my kids grew up, or at least went to high school. They all graduated with credits. They all did, dual credit things. None of them graduated with an associate's degree. There were a few that did. And I thought it was just such an incredible leg up. So I'll put a cork in it there, but just such a great surprise to me here. You talk about it. You come out of this period where you're self-learning. You've gone through Robbins. What made you decide? What was that trigger that said, I got to get back to college? Was it just the insistence of that your education is important, or did you have some other short epiphany?
I think it was, I had never intended not to.
Okay.
And I think as I was 21 at the time, I just realized, I didn't want to be too much older when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And I had this time that I sort of was able to, afford myself with the way that I finished the 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living in LA at the time. I was also only had 2 years of college, and I was working at Universal Studios in their home video marketing department. So a coordinator role. There was, a lot of other positions I saw people in, leadership, management, kind of that career trajectory. And I knew that wasn't something that I shouldn't say I knew I couldn't. It would be challenging to do that without the degree, right?
Yeah.
And felt like that was the path that I wanted to go in a corporate role. So as I was there, I figured out how to get my credits transferred, found the closest school was Northridge because I was living in the Valley, and knew that I was very interested in business. I think leadership and probably all that learning about Tony and kind of, I think that inspired me in
Mm-hmm.
that direction as far as a major. And so what I did was I left Universal, and I decided, I thought to myself, well, how am I going to go to college full time? Because of course I didn't want to do it part time because I needed to do it. I don't ever try to do anything on low. So I went full time, but I had to figure out how I could also support myself. So I had a friend that was working for, it was a Payne Weber at the time, one of
Okay.
the financial companies. And she said, "Oh, I usually go to work at 6:30 because she worked market hours in New York." So I said, "Oh, okay, I think I'll get that job." And so I figured out how to get my resume to what it needed to be. And I ended up getting a job at Solomon Smith Barney at the time, which ended up being Citigroup. So I got there and it was a pretty good salary at the time. I think somewhere around 40,000 a year with bonuses and all of that. Got there, realized, oh, I think I need a Series 7. So then I did that while I was going to school, kind of put all of that together. I finished within about 2 years, and then went and took a job in banking outside of it was in mergers and acquisitions. So
Okay.
I didn't really have that plan of what that was going to look like, but it
Yep.
sort of evolved out of necessity. I needed a job that made sense for the hours. I needed enough money to support that, and that's sort of really what started the career. And I ended up moving to New York, and yeah, I moved there
Awesome.
sight unseen too. I'd
You
always
did.
felt like I wanted to live in New York City, but I'd seen it on the movies, and
Hmm.
just I said, I think I'm going to go to New York, and I
Did you
moved
live in
there with.
Manhattan?
I did. I lived on
Okay.
first place I lived was the Upper West Side, and
Okay.
then I went to the Financial District, and then Upper East Side. That's where I met my husband.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Is your husband from New York?
No, he's actually from Delaware. He's an
Oh,
East
okay.
Coast guy, but he went to
Okay.
college in upstate New York, and then went to work there, and then yeah,
Super cool. I think you probably know I'm an East Coast guy, so
yeah.
I probably seem familiar. But if you met my wife, she sounds like she's definitely an East Coast gal for sure. Um, I want to go back to the leadership topic and start transitioning into the things that I think we're going to really sink our teeth in here. So thank you for all that background. I think people will enjoy that. Um, you start looking at leadership, things you probably, I know from Robbins, you're a fan of it. So it's more than personal development. It's how you lead and rise people up around you. But you start getting into this project. I think you said it was 2013 where you're doing a massive project and there's going to be massive widespread impact. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to tell me a little bit about what you meant by the importance of leadership through that product. But I also want to know, was the awareness that this project is going to impact so many people, was that front and center for the entire team? Or is this something that you recognized and sort of sunk your teeth into and then took to another place? Let's start with the first question, which was, when did you realize strong leadership through this massive change was going to be vital?
So I realized that as I was really the only point person, me and then my team, in bringing
Okay.
everything together. So healthcare just inherently is very siloed, and the situation with this tool is that it touched multiple departments. So I realized as I was going to talk to customer service, I mean, they're on a completely different page than
Mm-hmm.
appeals and grievances, or IT, or whatever it is. And I realized that nobody's talking to anybody, and we have to make sure that this all comes together successfully and that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's on the same page. And I think without having the awareness of really what people are thinking, which goes into empathy and what they're feeling and how this is going to impact them and downstream effects across the board, you really can't have a successful, I would say, implementation of a
Mm-hmm.
project. So I realized that was critical. I realized that the human piece was probably first and foremost what we needed to talk about and make sure that everyone understood, everyone was on the same page. We're talking about psychological safety. We're talking about, all of the questions that people are going to have. How does this affect my role specifically? How does this affect the people I work with or my team? And I think that's where my eyes opened up and I realized, this is a human thing, right? We've got the technology, we're going to figure this out and all of that stuff. But the issue here and what's going to define whether this is successful is if all of the people that we're working with are on board or, understand what's happening. Transparency. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
elements.
And despite all efforts, sometimes that message just doesn't make it to where it needs to get to with the best of intentions and the best of plans. Psychological safety, inclusion, and a compelling future. Like these are the three ingredients that, and I think we might have even touched on this. Um, these are the three things that's, some people would say, what's in it for me? Like if I'm making this big change and I'm participating in it, like how do I benefit from it? How do I have psychological safety that I'm not losing my job or my job's going to get harder? How am I included where I'm heard? Right. And what does it do to the future of my work and my being and my thing? And those three things are important. But you pulled back the same skills from being 11. I mean, is what I'm hearing, I mean, it's like, okay, I've got to navigate this. Yeah, I've been here before. I've done this different, but same, right? Got to make sure people get navigated. What were some of the challenges you ran into through that process?
Oh gosh, there was a lot of change, resistance to change. So again, I'll go back to healthcare, and I love healthcare. I'm not picking on healthcare, but there are a lot
Yeah.
of people that are very set in their ways, I would say.
Yep.
And so change is challenging. And if you
Mm-hmm.
approach it as, we're just going to fundamentally change everything, like with AI or whatever it is, that's not going to go over very well. So
Right.
you really have to step back and think about the change management piece. And again, that's a human thing. And I think that was the biggest challenge. We have people that were working there for 20, 25 years. Maybe the only job they've ever had is with that organization, right? We don't see that very often anymore in very many industries, but I will say in healthcare, especially in the payer space, it was a Blue Cross. So it's quite a
Mm-hmm.
few of them in the country. There are a lot of people they call lifers that are still there, have been there 20 years. This is the way we've done it. And it's very hard to kind of shift them over to a new way of
Yeah.
thinking. And, it's funny, I just posted about this today on LinkedIn, but, when you have that one person that may be negative, it
Mm-hmm.
spreads like wildfire, so
Sure
much
does.
more than maybe one champion, right? You've got to work 10 times as hard. So you have to identify who those people are and what you need to do to get them on board, right? And that's, again, it's a people thing, it's an empathy thing, it's building that rapport, understanding why they have these concerns, right? And there's a
Mm-hmm.
reason for it, and it goes probably way outside of even the organization, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest challenge with that implementation in particular, and then also balancing that with the people that want everything done yesterday, right?
Yeah.
We
Oh,
want
yeah.
this, we want to make the money, we want to do this, and you're sort of in the middle of what that is, and trying to make it work.
The groundswell from the front lines can kill a project
Yeah.
if the change and let's use an IVA, right? Intelligent virtual agent as an example. I've got so many people at various companies coming up to me right now, Elise, that say, hey, I just heard from the C-suite that I have to cut 30 million from my run rate in the call center by X date. They got a couple years. We don't expect anything in 2025, but the project should be up and running. We should start seeing some of it in 2026. And by end of full year 2027, we should exit 2027 with a $30 million decrease. And I think that represented about 30% of the contact center personnel expense. And so right there, boom, the target is set. Okay. And now I'm living through the conversation around the IVA. And, the first thing that happens is our business is so complex. How can an intelligent agent handle, we've got different rules for different counties and different spaces. And I say, hey, well, how does an agent handle it? But we're not going to chop off the head of the dragon. We're going to put tools in to help take the light work out first. Hey, what if I can authenticate somebody through an IVA first? What if I can come back and answer very easy, basic questions that you would answer either top of mind or that live in a knowledge base and they're county based or whatever. So you bring people in, but the decision making process to get there alone is elongated. In my space, we sell technology and help bring technology to companies to make it improve. The sales cycle and the decision making process, especially in AI, is well greater than a year. Well greater than a year. Then you've got the other, obstacles. A lot of vendor management. In the bigger the company, we have a 9-month boarding process for new. I mean, these opportunities, the C-suite says, go, I need 30 million off by this year. And then all the things underneath about that people are stuck in the way they do things. And it's not exclusive to healthcare. Yep, it's in healthcare. But you go into banking and you go into pretty much any other industry, and it's crazy. And the thing, and I wish I had my podcast was big enough to get Jamie Dimon on here. Because when I spent 5 years, and it will be at some point, right? We'll say we'll get there. But when I worked at JP Morgan Chase, I had the good pleasure of meeting Jamie a few times. I was part of a big project that was bringing 3 banks together. He was technically the lead of it, but then he pointed to a person and said, well, everything reports to him and all of you report to this person. And we had a 12-month project to accomplish something that probably should have taken us 2 years. And we did it in 12 months. And I now see Jamie, they've upped his social media presence. And he talks about culture and compassion and all of these things. But what he doesn't really know is that he is so disconnected from what really is going on at JP Morgan Chase. Like those things make it to his direct reports. And then as they come down and get into the rank and file, they get filtered and watered down and bent and twisted. And all of the things he thinks are super important that he touts to the street and everybody, I know from having been there and from talking to colleagues I know are still there, there's a massive disconnect. It's a massive disconnect. So he'll come out and go, we got this big commitment to AI. We're going to do this. We're going to bring efficiency. I'm going to bring 22% value over the next 5 years to shareholders. We're going to be able to grow without actually hiring any extra people. He never talks about laying off people, but sometimes that's a reality and all of these things. And then you got people whose job is to do one thing. And then we put in a bot or an RPA or something like that all of a sudden does this thing, and they are resisting the change. So change management, I'm just bolstering your point. Change management is in the enterprise, very, very difficult. So many constituents, so many people involved, and you got to get out there. And you know what, Elise, you just got to tell the truth. Hey, this job is going to do X, Y, Z, but think about this company that I'm dealing with needs to shave 30 million in personnel expense. Unless this company acquires 30% more volume, the message isn't you're all going to have your jobs. I'm not just going to have to hire more people. The message is we're going to need less people. So people start automatically looking for jobs, right? Hey, this thing is out here. It's not going to last. I got between 18 and 36 months. I better find something now. I better move now, or maybe it will, or maybe it won't, or what could I do to get in the way? Very difficult. The psychological piece, and this is a great transition, the psychological piece of change management and doing things in an enterprise, changing software, putting in automation, even changing a process is an incredible tax on the project. And I know that you've done a lot of work looking into this space, the emotional and psychological impacts of, let's say, putting AI into an organization. I'm going to shut up for a little while. I'd like to hear you talk about what led you to this topic, what landed you here, and what you've discovered along the way.
Yeah. So when I went down the path of the information science doctorate, I really began digging into the research and understanding how information is used in different ways and contexts. And I I gravitated a lot towards psychology. If I had I not gone the business route, I was very interested in sort of psychology, um, just why people sort of do the things they do, how they're motivated. So what I was looking at in my research is a lot of how information is used in organizations, what people do, how they filter it, what they think about, and somewhere around 2020, I read some research on AI, and I thought, I'm very interested in how AI will be used in medicine. My healthcare background, I found an AI champion who's a cardiologist in California who's been really talking about AI for about 10 years. Has an organization. Has some of the most well-known leading physicians in the country that are part of it, championing AI and the use of AI. It's called AI Med. And so I just started to kind of get in touch with him, go to the conferences, learn, and took a separate path of AI education. And that was long before ChatGPT and all of that. And I was trying to
Yeah.
figure out, how is this going to be used in healthcare settings? How is this going to be used for patient care? And what's that going to do? And again, from that sort of information lens, psychology lens, I'm imagining how are people and patients going to respond when, AI is reading the scans versus a radiologist and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. It's just more of an interest. And I tied that into, what I was studying, what I was teaching at UNT. And I think that's what started it. And then when ChatGPT kind of took off and launched, I guess it was fall of 22, I
Mm-hmm.
think I got my account in January. So I've, been using it and involved, and it just went from there, and really thinking about how much it's exploded. And now, AI is this mainstream topic. With that, we have so many people now that are anxiety ridden, concerned, hearing the headlines, right? 50% of jobs are going to be automated, right? What was it? Dario Amodei said a couple months ago, I think 50% of entry level jobs will be gone to AI by 2030, I believe was and we're seeing headlines like that all the time,
Yeah.
right? What's automation going to do? We have this whole uh, transition with the gig economy and
Mm-hmm.
how jobs are going to look so different. And I think that really just brought me to wanting to talk more about it, work on a book about what humanity is, where we sit with all of this change, kind of on a bigger level. So I looked at it at the organizational level. I did a lot of research in my doctorate, teach elements of it, and then I just wanted to take it up and say, what are we really doing, and how does that impact everyone? And that's sort of the 5 year journey with AI and sort of information and psychological safety. I guess I didn't really address the psychological safety
Yeah.
part as much, but I'll say, what I know is that for people to feel psychologically safe in an organization, they have to have that support, like you said, the
Yeah.
transparency, and we need those people to feel that way so that they can speak up. Nobody's going to say anything when they don't feel secure. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, there's such a disconnect. We need those people. We
Yeah.
need to know what's going on, how they feel, what's happening, because that's ultimately going to determine how successful, your project is, your
Yeah.
your company is, your revenues for the quarter, whatever it is. It's not just up here at this level.
There's a lot of potential sabotage that could happen there if you don't understand that particular component of it. What's the name of the book you're working on? Do you have a title?
I have a working title. It's
Okay.
AI Uncomplicated, but I am actually expanding that, so it's going to have
Okay.
humanity in it as well. So it's AI
Interesting.
Uncomplicated. I'm about halfway through.
Okay. Do you have a target for a release?
Well, my target was September. I think
Okay.
that might be slightly optimistic. If I can get it done by the end of the year, I will be happy.
Good for you. Good for you. I if I can share an experience with you. My first book, The Lucky 13, took me 7 years to write. 7 years, and the reason it took 7 years is one of the core competencies was an understanding about diversity. I grew up in New York, I grew up in the melting pot of the universe, one of the melting pots of the universe. I grew up amongst massive diversity. My father was a Italian Roman Catholic, and my mother was an English Jewish faithed person. And so I've had all of those influences in my family. And if you traveled within blocks of where I lived, you had pockets of people from all over the world. You really did. Lots of immigrants, lots of color, ethnicity, church on this corner, synagogue on that corner. I mean, it was just, and so for me, diversity was just, it was normal. Like I grew up in a place where, yeah, everybody's just people. Did people call each other names, Elise? Of course they did. Did they have slurs? Yeah, of course. Some of them they embraced. It was bizarre. Well, now it's bizarre, but then it was very normal. And so I wrote this chapter on diversity that came from that place. But I was also maturing through an organization where the diversity was math and metrics. Never would admit it was. Didn't ever come out and say it. But the day I realized it was all bullshit, pardon me, was that we had a 10% reduction in force that was pushed down from the top. And I had always grown up in working in these meritocracies, and we had people ranked and force ranked. So, threes, twos, and ones, and one was the best, two was in the middle, three was the worst. First people go is the three. And then you had to force rank the twos, because if I had 250 twos, who was two number one and who was two number the last one, right? And we went painfully through the forced rankings, and this was part of our discipline, so we didn't have to make it up. And we came up with the list of the 10% of the staff we need to happen. And we submitted to HR and said, these are the people on the list. And the list comes back and says over 40, woman over 50, Latina, Asian, African American, like all these metrics came back thrown right in my face. And so I say, hey, if this is not the list, then tell me what metrics I need to hit. Oh, no, we don't have any metrics. We don't, but well, if you don't have metrics, then how did you evaluate this list and tell me that I don't have the right balance? So rather than me just throw darts randomly at the wall, tell me what the rules are. And at that moment, I realized, hey, we're in a litigious world. This is sort of part of where we are. It's okay. I'm the freak. I grew up in this, melting pot of diversity. Everybody's just a person to me. Maybe not everybody's that way. So when I wrote this chapter on diversity, it came from the purest place. And I was worried that if I released it with that chapter, that I'd get canceled. Because, and it wasn't mean. It wasn't offensive in any way. It wasn't sensitive enough. That was the point. I just was like, man, and I didn't want to take it out, because I believe from a leadership perspective, having diverse teams is part of one of the components of success. Diverse in thinking, diverse in experience, diverse, the male female piece, like everything involved only brings a universe that's bigger than the one you're working in. And that's always what I believe. And I just thought, this is not towing the corporate line. I do the corporate line because of where I grew up, but I don't do it because of metrics. But I'm not mentioning the metrics and the oppressed and the this and the that and all these buzzwords. And it took me another 3 years to come up with the courage to rewrite that chapter, to finally get it to a spot where I was not a robot regurgitating all the stuff that you hear that's in the HR manual, but it wasn't Vic from Brooklyn. And it took me a while. The point is, the second book I wrote in 4.5 months.
Wow.
And that book is called The RFP is Dead. It's about the RFP process, why the request for proposal process is hurting your business. And it falls into AI because AI is moving so fast and the RFP takes so long. And by the time I get to the RFP, all the vendors I looked at have all this great new and crazy functionality that, we have another way. I'll leave that for another podcast. Put a date on it, take a massive action plan and get it done. And when you finally do, Was this your first book or have you written others?
This is my first book.
Yeah,
Yes.
you are. I'm telling you, when this thing is out, and if you ever want any help on the guides and self-publishing on Amazon, I'm an ace at it now. I'd be happy to jump on a separate call with you. I have templates and things like it. I could help you make it easy. Um, you're going to get addicted to it. It's so much fun. And once the first one is out and I did that, that's unbelievable. You'll set a short goal. By the way, I'm going on vacation in a few weeks. You know what my goal is? I have 20 days. I'm going to write the next book in 20 days.
On vacation?
Because I'm an early riser. So I get up 5:30, 6 o'clock. I don't see anybody till 9. So coffee, laptop, right? And I've got all these great hours. It's called Sales and Social Currency. It's about relationship and sales versus marketplaces and clicking and checking boxes. I'll let you know how it goes. I have the outline. I have the chapter framework. I have all the stuff. I've got tons and tons of notes. I've got transcripts from calls, but it's going to happen in 20 days. I'll let you know how I do it. Let
I
you know how it
love
goes.
that.
Or at least getting to a spot where I send it to a person I've entrusted on editing and other feedback. But I'm excited for you to do this, and I'm excited to read it when it comes out. I'm gonna send you some nudge notes along the way. How we doing?
Yeah.
How's your progress going? If you need a massive action plan, buddy, I'll help you do that. Tell me about what you're learning and what the studies say about AI and psychological safety, maybe a little bit deeper if you're willing to share.
Well, the studies, I will say, the first thing, I'll back up to not so much the psychological piece,
Okay.
but if I could just talk a little bit about companies, organizations, and leaders right now when it comes to AI, and I think this will play into that, is that I don't, I have had a number of conversations with leaders that have come to me for either consulting or just people I know and want to adopt AI for the sake of AI or for their investors. And oh, this looks good. We should have AI because, we want to go for this series funding and we don't have this specific technology. And it just really, brings to light that that is not the approach. If we're talking about psychological safety, we're talking about really long term. I'll call it long term success of the organization of a leader. We have to identify what the problem is and how AI is the solution for that problem.
Yes.
And be open minded to the fact that AI may not be the solution. And I think through that process, we can understand on the ground different levels of the organization where the issues are and how they can actually be solved. And I think that's the first step that I think I see people make that is a mistake when it comes, smaller, medium-sized businesses looking at AI. It's all before this vendor management RFP, looking at who's out there, and there's a whole lot of
million of them
pitfalls that can happen. Yeah, there's a whole lot of them and there's a whole lot of risks associated with that. But even before you take that step, and I think that ties back to thinking about your end customers, your employees, that experience. And I would say that the psychological safety piece of it is really developing that transparency with your leadership style, understanding and being empathetic, knowing where your team is, and then if that is the solution, whatever the solution is, AI or however you're going to solve your problem, you're clear about it. You're clear, at least to the extent that you understand, what those implications are. Like you said, if it means a reduction in workforce, then let's talk about that. And let's say, the people that are in this role, maybe that means that they are open-minded to learning different skills. Maybe they can take the escalated phone calls, for example, in a call center, right? That the AI can't address that, whatever percentage of, and open their eyes to other opportunities versus, I'm done, or I need to go, or I'm not
Yeah.
of value anymore because of my job. So I think thinking about all of that really plays into the psychological safety. It's not just, are you there for your one-on-one with your team? I mean, it's thinking about what they're experiencing, what
Hmm.
they're people, and they have these emotions, and most people don't like change, no matter what it is, right? I
No,
mean, we all take,
no.
not all of us, but we find a path to work, and generally we take that path. And if there's road construction, most people are probably annoyed because they have to go on a detour. And
Take a
it's
detour.
just it's our human nature, the way we're wired. So I think as leaders can understand that, it helps bridge that
So,
gap.
yeah, and I hear you on all those levels, and I'm just going to put a little rubber to the road and want to see how we talk through this. There are some roles that no matter how we sugarcoat it and how we try to uptrain, there's going to be a reduction in force. I don't think there's a car plant in the universe that has a person lift a tire and put it on and put the 5 bolts in anymore, right? It's been away for a very long time. But in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you had a job. You mounted tires, right?
Yeah.
And then, and even before the impact wrench, the little spindle, then the impact, I could do more tires. Then all of a sudden, the robot puts the tires on, and there's a thing that goes in and screws the 5 nuts on at the exact same time, and it moves down this line. So there is an evolution of that. Another example is I have a buddy who spent his life in the construction business, union iron worker in New York, put up, skyscrapers. He tells me stories of his dad bringing him to the top of the World Trade Center, holding a tape while they were measuring the helipad on the top, third generation, maybe fourth generation iron worker. And when you when people do roadways or you pour concrete, there's something in there that's called rebar. These are solid steel rods that are lifted up off the ground and they're suspended, and they make these crosses, and that is poured. When the concrete's poured around it, it stabilizes that concrete. When the rebar is placed over one another, they're tied with wire to keep them from moving. So when you pour, they don't bend and move. I don't know exactly what that process is called. And we were having a conversation about using that technique on a problem I'm having out on our piece of property out in West Texas, trying to keep raccoons out of dwellings and whatnot, right? And I said, oh yeah. I said, have you ever seen the tool that does that? He goes, yeah, it's called the guy bent over, breaking his back. And they do it by hand. I'm like, no, dude, there's a tool for that. There's a Makita and there's all these different tools. He's like, man, I've been retired too long. I said, yeah, let me send you this YouTube link. And I send him the link, and it's a guy with a gun. Bzz, bzz,
Wow.
bzz, bzz, just doing it. And he's like, yeah, but he's still bent over. I go, no, they make a pole handle for that. Right? So what does it lead to? The next video I find is this robot. Not a human robot, but a little machine bot. Looks like one of those Roombas. And it's on 4 wheels, and it rolls down the bed. And he goes, man, everybody's out of work. That was his response. Man, everybody's out of work. Now, this was a prototype. The next video I found is like there's a production date. It's the latter part of this year. But they're going to put this thing on those rebar paths, and it's done. That's an example. Like the day you show up with that on the job, the laborers that used to bend over miles of roadways, they're going to get their backs back, but they're going to lose their paycheck. Right? That's going to happen. So in the corporate space, and I'll go back to the example, shave 30 million off your personnel expense. The only way that'll stay flat is if they go by, companies that increase their volume by 30%. And then if you're in the C-suite and you're accountable, let's say you're a publicly traded company and you're like shareholder price, shareholder value, shareholder price. You've got this dance that you're dealing with. Every 90 days, you got to get out and announce your earnings to the street. But you also got to build a culture and something very important on the inside that gives people purpose and a meaning to stay there. How do leaders manage honesty and transparency while maintaining controlling risk of a mass exodus, but also being honest and really upfront with their people? Sometimes they know exactly what it's going to do. But if they tell people there's a mass exodus, it's catastrophic to the business. On the other hand, you want to create this psychological safety, and you want to make sure you're honest with your employees. And yes, there are going to be some up training and upskilling opportunities, but not for everybody. When you think about all of that, and my human side leans towards, hey, I'll figure it out if it gets rough for me. Like I can't do people wrong. But if I'm in the C-suite and I got a responsibility to shareholders and the board and the stock price and all of these things, where hundreds and thousands of other people are invested in our company, counting on a return on that investment, how do people navigate that? It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of leaders have, and it's not just now, it's throughout time. We've had,
Mm-hmm.
different economic cycles and things that happen. I think being transparent without inciting fear it's a balance. It really
Mm.
is. And I think with some of these organizations, what we are seeing is the way that they're kind of counterbalancing that is offering upskilling opportunities. But like you
Mm-hmm.
said, they're free to employees. Some organizations are offering it just free to anyone, right? You can just go and start learning about AI or different things. You can learn about almost anything at now on YouTube or wherever. I think you could have to be transparent, but to the extent that you're not causing mass hysteria. And also, like I said, you're balancing that with the opportunity. And I think we also have to, as not leaders, but just as employees, as people going through change, we've all gone through massive changes throughout. If you just look back on this century, right? Like you're saying, this tool we're talking
Yeah.
about, industrialization. Go back, that things change, and
Yeah.
we have to take responsibility for that too as individuals. Um, to the extent that we think about what our roles are and maybe where we can move, shift, change, what skills are transferable, which ones aren't. And I think having the resources within an organization to support employees, whether it's that or whether it's mental health support,
Mm-hmm.
because I think those are the things that you have to do. I think not being forthcoming isn't the answer.
I
It's
agree.
being transparent, but it's doing it in a way that is mindful of the people that are receiving this information and giving them other opportunities. I think I'll go back to what I was talking about when I was younger. I think whenever something would happen, the first thing my brain defaults to is, okay, how do I solve this problem? What
Yeah.
are the options? Whether it's I don't I'm very quick. We were it's a funny
Yeah.
example. We were sitting around a bunch of girls. We went to get wine, and there's this bonfire thing in the middle of it, and something caught on fire and everyone screams, and I'm the only one that just grabs the napkin or the it was a like a blanket thing and put it on top and just put the fire out, and everyone's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And I was like, I didn't even think about it. I just problem, and
Just
I
did
I
it.
try to figure out how to, and I think every time I've had a disappointment, whatever happens in my life, I don't know, um there's probably only been one time where I was like, I can't solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I come up with a solution, okay, maybe that's not going to work. And I don't stop until I figure out what it is that will fix that. So I think helping employees adopt I call it a growth mindset, an
Mm-hmm.
ability to take a different path would it would help. And I think people need to empower themselves to do that as well. I
Agreed.
mean, we're
All roads lead to
experiencing
you being
change.
11. All roads
Yeah.
lead to you being 11, by the way, which is,
It-
it's remarkable and fascinating. And you're so lucky. And I know maybe at the time you didn't feel so lucky. But the way you have developed out of necessity this strong problem solving skill set is just, it's amazing. And it's a case study unto itself, like what happens out of need versus desire. Like you
right.
might not have had a desire at 11, you had a need. And that
Right.
desire came in later when you were afforded the ability to have space for a desire versus, but at 11, that's a need. It's like, I got to get this done. and you've transformed it into something incredibly positive in your life. And you've kind of launched me a softball. I don't know if you know it, but I got a question here that I did a little reading through your LinkedIn's here, and I read something where you said most negative emotions only last 90 seconds unless you fuel them. Can you expand on that a little bit? How should leaders, use that insight in the high pressure environments? Is there a pattern
Yeah.
interrupt people can do? Like, talk more about that. What influenced you to write that?
So where that came from in the research, it's very interesting. It's Jill Bolte Taylor from Harvard.
Okay.
She published a book in the mid 2000s, and she's a brain scientist from Harvard. She actually experienced a stroke in the 90s,
Mm.
and it led her to go down this path of researching. And through her discovery, we have this, when something happens, an emotional trigger, we have a physiological response and then our psychological response. So our
Okay.
physiological, our amygdala is cued. We have adrenaline, we've got cortisol, we get hot, sweaty, all those
Yeah.
things, right? It's a kind of an innate thing, that way we're wired as humans, and comes from evolution. That happens, and her discovery is that you have that for about 90 seconds. And then you have, the experience that you have, the psychological piece of it. And often people will continue to revisit that experience in their minds and continue
Mm.
to trigger the the feelings and the response. So, again, like the example of traffic, I'll use that. Someone cuts you
Mm-hmm.
off. If you get upset for a second, and then I don't know if you've noticed times where suddenly, the music's on and you've completely forgotten about it, or you've driven 4 miles thinking about how you're going to see that person and then cut them off, right?
Yeah.
That's the perfect example of like continuing in that loop versus breaking that pattern. And this, reminds me actually, I know Tony Robbins talks a lot about the pattern interrupts and breaking
Yeah.
patterns. And it's a very similar concept. And so as leaders, if you feel that physically, what you want to do is have the awareness. You don't want to get yourself in that mental loop to continue to feel that and have the physiological response. So some ways that are effective: awareness is the first thing, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that this is how it is and that you can control it. From there, taking a pause, right? Is it, deep breath? I know Tony also
Mm-hmm.
talks about that, right? The deep
Yeah.
breathing, the reset, understanding that this is, a temporary emotion that you're feeling, and not using that as a trigger to react or make a decision until you can step back and think without all of those, chemicals flooding your body, right? And a lot of people don't have um, the emotional regulation of the people that say, okay, I made a poor decision in the moment, right? Because that's what they did. They didn't step back and think about it outside of when they're feeling all of that, and they just do, versus, taking the deep breaths and resetting. But that's
Yeah. Well,
essentially.
you raised something interesting, and maybe put in another term is that people easily associate reps to in physical, right? Hey, if I eat right and I go to the gym, I can build some muscle, right? Vic still got a few, um, but and that there's a process there, right? And I know to the contrary, if I eat bad foods that are unhealthy for me, and I'm sedentary and I don't exercise, my physical appearance can reflect that as well. We have the same control via self-regulation. And honestly, the dopamine hit that you get from the very first time that you say, here's a situation, I'm about to snap. Um, I need to pattern interrupt myself. That could be the breath. That could be the moment. That could be listening more deeply, letting the other person, rather than somebody barking, you bark right back. It's like, let that bark come.
Yeah.
Process that bark, right? What's causing this bark? Well, why are they really mad? They mad at me? Probably not. Probably. 9.9 out of 10 times, it matters something else that happened and not the situation. You just happen to be the catalyst that brought all the stuff out, right? That pause. And I wish more people, and if there is a clip we're going to take here, it's going to be your piece describing this and maybe a little bit of my counter. But this is a tool that people can develop with practice, much like the chest press or the bicep curl, doing the reps. You have to do the reps. And people are so powerful. And if they deployed these tactics and skills in their self-regulation, to gain emotional intelligence, to be a better listener, to fold in empathy, to understand why people are responding, the outcomes are going to be significantly different. Then it becomes a tool in your tool belt.
Right.
Right? It
Right.
becomes a tool in your tool belt. Do you have, any examples or experiences of similar?
Well, I think people don't necessarily realize that it is like a muscle and you can build your emotional intelligence over time. you IQ is sort of static. EQ, you can develop empathy through different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the important piece. And that ties back to, if you think about habits, right?
Yeah.
James Clear talks a lot about
Yeah.
habits, habit forming. You actually create those neural pathways in your brain. So if you are doing this new response, right, over and over, it becomes your default. It's like when I grab the thing and put the fire. I don't think about it. It just happens, right?
Yeah.
And if you do that enough, right? I think the science behind it was something close to 70 times you do something and it becomes a habit. I think that was in
Yeah.
James Clear's book.
Okay.
It just becomes your default reaction. And emotional intelligence and building that is very similar in that if you consciously have to respond to, whatever the triggers are over time, that will become your default. You can be that person. You can have that skill. You can enhance that. And I think it's important for people to recognize and realize that, because I think some people say, well, I just don't do that. Or, oh, I'm just a hothead and I can't,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, you can control that. You very much can if you want to.
Boy, that's a gold nugget right there. And everybody likes confirmation bias, so I love it because I feel and believe and breathe the same air in that topic. But I only do it because I wasn't always that way. And while not perfect and always a work in progress in certain areas, that is such a habit forming capability that people have with consistency, with whether it be a dopamine rush or something that comes from it or a feel good. I want to do a little lightning round and wrap up here in our last 5 minutes, if you don't mind. I want to ask you a bunch of questions that I wanted to get to. What does responsible AI really mean in a business context to you when I say that?
It means a human centered approach. I think at
Okay.
the highest level, responsible AI is using AI to solve business problems while maintaining humanity. So, what I mean is, keeping the people, always people, employees, products, customers, whatever, not products, employees, customers at
Mm-hmm.
the forefront of your decision making. And it's a human centric approach. How do what does this solve for people? And also, how does this impact the people? So I think that's first and foremost, prioritizing transparency, ethical oversight, right? We can't just drop a tool and then hope everything works out. We have
Right.
to, we have to make sure that, so for example, what are the bias, what bias exists? And then if you address that, you don't just then implement the tool and walk away, because there will be bias that you will develop over time. So you have to have processes in place to ethically kind of address all of the things, which comes with understanding the tools and technology. So I think responsible AI looks like considering, the people, understanding the tools, effective oversight, and the emotional intelligence of the leaders that are involved. And as an organization, making sure that your leaders, your key leaders, your champions really understand what's going on and put the important things first.
Love it. Last question. You've worked with lots of companies and leaders throughout your time and career and currently. And there's always been an evolution of leadership. We've seen it change. I don't think the Jack Welchers live around much anymore, although there's some, right, that have that. Um, what's the biggest shift you're seeing right now in how leadership is evolving?
I would say we are seeing a lot of the what people are calling soft skills are becoming front and center. So, we talked a lot about
Okay.
emotional intelligence, empathy, communication skills. Those are things that I think we are going to see have a tremendous amount of currency as we move forward in the next 5+ years with technology adoption, automation, AI. I know I mentioned the gig workforce. So if we
Mm-hmm.
have, I think, roughly half of all jobs will be a part of that. We are now seeing skilled workers that are a part of that. So, your fractional CFO, CIO, the gig economy is going to expand. And if you think about that from a leadership standpoint, you're managing, right, the work and the operations of this sort of balanced and different workforce than we've ever had before. So I think that we are going to see leaders need to be able to navigate that effectively, and all of the competence is going to come from an understanding of obviously the business and the technology, but how to effectively manage those people and really hone in on the soft skills. I think that's what is going to be the biggest shift that hasn't traditionally been as emphasized as much, I'll say.
My research agrees with you about the gig economy and the gig workforce. I'm curious what you see and why you think that the gig workforce is going to expand.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think post COVID, so COVID obviously changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
People realized what remote working, what you could do from remote working, what it felt like as an employee. We also have this generation. I've just had a conversation with someone in their 20s, and they said, "I will never work in an office. I can't believe you guys used to work in offices for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it's just so
Yeah.
foreign." And that's the mindset, and that is our new workforce. So I think that coupled with a lot of people retiring, we've got people that have this lifestyle. We have companies that are needing to be agile and adapt. And, there's obviously cost factors, AI, technology. So I think all of those things together are creating this kind of perfect storm where we're seeing the gig economy is not just an Uber driver or, delivery, right? We're seeing, like I said, very skilled, high level people looking for that type of a role. And I agree that within 5 years, it's going to be radically different.
Yeah. I my research and experience, because we offer a lot of gig economy workforce for contact center people. And interestingly enough, those spaces have brought in very high caliber, high talent people. A significant other who doesn't have 40 hours a week, a retiree who wants to come back to the workforce, whose brain is on fire and sharp and wants to engage with people and is a problem solver, but wants to work from 10 to 12 just to chit chat with people and engage. And so this whole caliber of people that have come back toward the top of the funnel of this workforce has been great. But I mostly align with what you said about life's choices. I can't
Yeah.
imagine working in an office 8 hours a day. They people can't fathom it. They can't fathom it. And people are fighting tooth and nail. When I say people, leaders of companies, to get people back to the workforce. Do I think there is something to be said about being in an office with people, about knowledge transfer and career advancement? I still believe those things are important. We're going to have to navigate through that. I think the genie's out of the bottle with COVID. I think you're completely spot on with it. But I'm concerned about a crash in commercial real estate big time. If we thought the residential mortgage crisis in '08 was bad, if people
Right.
don't come back to these high rises, and we're going to be facing something that's unprecedented. And I don't know what we do with those spaces. They become living facilities. Do they? I mean, and people are doing more things. When COVID hit, Citibank invested hundreds of billions of dollars into reforming and refactoring workspaces all over the place. One of my best friend's wife works at Citi, and she first they're like, "Oh, we're gonna have everybody back 3 days a week." Well, they rebuilt this space and they created so little space because they spread everybody out. Well, no, we'll have everybody out 2 days a week because our calculations were wrong. But I think what you said, the younger generations, they saw what the choice looked like.
Mhm.
All right. And they like, they're getting social interaction differently than maybe you or I got it or other people get it. The jury's out whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But
Yeah.
I'm with you on the gig economy, and I appreciate your perspective on it.
Yeah.
Elise,
Absolutely.
I can't believe an hour and 20 minutes has blown by us so quickly. I can't thank you enough. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, hearing your perspectives on things. I learned a few things, right, which I'm going to put in some of my show notes. And I like your perspective in certain areas. And honestly, you've refocused because I deploy a lot of AI. You've helped me resharpen my focus on the human side and the empathetic side of what happens to people by putting these tools in. Because my engagement was largely with the COO and the CFO. And they're like, Vic, man, I'm dying. I'm not going to make it. Like, I got to cut costs. And I'm going to refocus on the full change management piece as a result of our conversation today. I'm a empathetic guy, but maybe I was lacking it a little bit in practice and how we approach this business. So thank you for that. I
Well,
super
thank you.
appreciate it. Yeah, really, really great time today.
All right. Well, thank you. It was an honor to be on your show.
I appreciate it. Bye now. Please don't forget to like, comment,